Okay, so let's build an AI application from scratch today, right? Let's go from, raw text all the way to something that looks a lot more like this, which is a polished, relatively polished front end, not necessarily ready for production, but I wanted to demonstrate how easy it is to build these things now and, share some of the things that I've learned, but also provide a pattern for where to spend your time and how to go through the different steps of working with these models, right? I've been working with them for a long time now, with billions of tokens, and there's all of these things that you learn and you realize everyone's building and learning in silos, and the patterns really aren't properly set just yet. So this came out of just a need that I had the other day. I had about 200 hours of meetings over the last 2.5 months, just talking about a number of different things. And I knew there was a lot of really valuable things in those meetings. And I had a bunch of questions that I wanted to pull out of those meetings. And so, well, I didn't necessarily want to build it. I looked for CRM. None of them had good transcriptions, the ability to ask your own specific questions, and were under, $1,000. But it was really insane just how quickly you can get to something like this, where, you can look through the things that you want, you can take some notes, you can look through, the meetings that you specifically would like. They're all tagged differently. And what that did was it took about 30 million tokens of meetings, or 40 million tokens, which is about 40 million words, or slightly less than that, all the way down to, once you pull just the information that you want, down to about 300,000 words. Now that becomes readable, to something that, with the structure and the UI, I was pleasant enough, was happy enough for me to skim and look through and pull out information. I just managed to learn a lot. So why don't we just get started right away? So this isn't the right way to build things for production, right? This is just a way to prove proof of concepts. And as these models get better, we're quickly getting to a point where you can just very quickly build a proof of concept, right? So the thing that I usually talk about, and before we start, let's find use the ones from the wonderful, Latent Space podcast. They get a bunch of really great people to come on. I always enjoy the conversations. And so I've got, a couple of them that I've just copied into a folder here, right? Let's pretend these are our meetings and we can pull out the information that we would like, right? So the first thing we're going to do effectively is go in, use them, and just start looking at what we can pull out. Now, I spoke about this a while back, but the interesting thing here is the pattern that I fall into most is what I would call chat, play, loop, and nest. And the idea there effectively is to figure out where you want to spend the most of your time that you're going to get the most out of, and then sort of squeeze down as you get closer and closer to a proof of concept or a product, right? So the first step there effectively is chat, right? And that is because these new models, because they're so large and so important, are at the bottom of your stack. So the providers are where oftentimes you want to start. And almost every provider you can think of, whether that's Google, OpenAI, Claude, or Mistral, they have a chat interface, right? Most of them are free, right? And if you want something even better that it's still surprisingly not enough people know about, you can look at the Vercel AI Playground, where you can compare models side by side, again, for free. I think you can pay them to get more models, but there's a ton of models already available that you can just talk to, right? Or you can use Mistral's Lechat, or Claude's Claude, or OpenAI has this application you might have heard of called ChatGPT, the thing. You can use that. So you want to talk to these models, and you want to spend most of your time there working and reworking how you work with them. That's going to give you a sense for which models are better at what the models actually know, what's actually in your data. 99% of the time, your problems are with your data, right? Because it's ambiguous, or there's something missing, or you're not asking the right question. So it gives you a good idea of what actually is in that data, right? So the first thing we want to do is we're just going to copy in our transcript straight up, and I'm just going to ask a bunch of questions, right? I'm compressing this section down. I spent most of my time here just asking so many different questions until I found the ones that gave me the best answers. And the more questions you ask, the more you realize what else you want to know. So I'm just going to ask a few questions. Okay, uh, from this transcript, can I get a you know summary? A list of participants with their bios and what they do, all the contacts mentioned, companies, people, etc., uh, who mentioned and how they're useful. And you know what? Let's just leave it there, right? I had a bunch more questions, but we can leave these here for just brevity. Okay, So we're getting answers now, and this is where you spend your time trying to figure out how that works. But once you've got a good, repeatable set of questions that the models can reliably answer, one useful thing to always ask when you run into issues with your data is, do you have a list of 10 questions for me? I can just ask for questions to, and I don't want to say data, I want to say transcript, right? You don't have to answer these, but usually it's a really great way to understand what the model finds confusing. And sometimes you can fill them in, and sometimes they're generic. And if you fill them in, you'll find your answers getting so much better. Okay, so there's a bunch of stuff that it doesn't fully get, right? None of those affect us as far as our meetings go. So the next thing we want to go to is play, which, is for playground. So if I go to Anthropic's console, almost all of them have one. They'll all give you some credits to be able to use them. Wonderful time to be alive. I'm going to set the temperature a little high. That adds to the randomness of the response. Usually you don't. This is just how much of an output you're going to get. This is very, very sparse, right? And this is where you put your prompts in, and this is where you get your responses. And I'm just going to pick a cheaper model. I'm just going to pick Haiku. You want to pick smaller models, especially when you're tuning and sort of optimizing, because they'll give you responses faster, so you have a faster iterative loop, but also you won't spend as much. And hey, if it works, that's awesome. And if it doesn't, it's going to point out some problems with your prompt, some problems with the way you're phrasing things and the way you're working with the model that you want fixed, right? Intelligence has a way of papering over mistakes, so they only show up at the end. You want them to show up now, because now's the best time for you to be able to change exactly what you're doing. So I'm just going to copy these questions in, and I'm just going to copy in my transcript. So I know that Claude likes XML, so I'm just going to use XML tags. Thing is, you don't actually have to do this anymore. You do if you're trying to take a production application from 98% to 99.5%. For a proof of concept, not really. They've gotten so smart. Or you're working with local, smaller open source models where this really matters. And I remember talking about it a while back when I was pretty prescriptive on you have to know what kind of input the models want. But as they get smarter, it gets easier and easier to work with them. So it's perfect. And you always want to validate that you get the same kind of output, because this is where you interact with the base model almost directly, right? No middleman. There's a lot of conveniences like retrieval and a number of other things here, formatting, and maybe you don't get to set the temperature or the model or any of it in some cases. That is there to save the provider cost and to improve your experience based on what they think you would like or what the average would like. So here you're interacting with the model. So you always want to double check. Now, here's a really useful thing, right? Is work with structured outputs and structured inputs when possible, right? When I say structure, I mean JSON, XML, any way to provide it as structure, right? If you know an Excel sheet, that's structured, right? Because computers find it easier to work with structured data. Now, if I used a different transcript and asked the same questions, I would get what would look indistinguishable to a human, but couldn't be more different to a computer, right? Even just the addition of an extra line or taking something from a bulleted list to a numbered list, all of those are massive breaks in structure. But it's pretty easy to pull out structure if you know how, right? Here's an easy way to pull out structure. I can take that, pull it back into the conversation, and go, can you give this to me as a structured JSON? Right? And what that's going to try to do is now take the information that it's given you and then try to restructure it as a JSON, right? And once you have that, you can put that back in and go, can I get a proper, I'm going to say with types. So you can use TypeScript here, but you can also use things like JSON schema, which is what OpenAI uses, or any other way, Zod, or any other way to describe the type. And they all have their pros and cons. I love TypeScript because that's a language that I work in and it's really great to work with. But it's also very terse, easy to read, human readable, and it's very easy to move around. And because there's a lot of it in the world and there's a lot of people like us that use it, models are very familiar with it. You generally want to stay well within what the model knows. And you'll see this when we go to building the UI. If you can stick closer to what the model knows, you'll have more success because there's less to teach, right? Um, sure. Mm, okay, so I've just asked for a proper type spec. There we go. Okay. And so this is relatively simple. We've got the summary, participants, and the contacts, right? So now here's how you structure it. And there's a reason why you stay in playground mode, right? The reason for that is the conversation history, which a lot of people treat as append only, that they just want to add the next thing because that's what we do with humans, right? I can't go back and change my output in a conversation, and I can't really change someone else's output either. But when it comes to models, that it simply isn't the case. I can change what I said, I can change what it said, and that all has a massive difference. And so you really want to treat these things as flexible. So here, what I can very easily do is just go in here, get rid of this, nobody said that. What happened? And also, man, I always ask for TypeScript, right? Can I get it as a JSON, properly escape? It doesn't really like it. When I copy from there, it breaks my line breaks. So I'll probably just do this, then get rid of this. This is just to make life a little bit easier, right? And you'll see that now I just get a specific JSON. And if I open up a new console, and this is where you want to slowly start adding, some more data, right? So we had one transcript here. It's another one with Sumit. So I'm going to do that. And now I can just copy exactly that in, and I'm going to get a JSON output, right? Oh, I accidentally picked. Be careful. I at one point spent, like 50 times more money than I should have because I forgot to change that. So always watch out. And they're smart for defaulting to Opus. And we're getting exactly the same kind of output, right? These are identical in structure. And that matters a lot because now we can start using it, right? Don't worry about this. This is just some sort of an issue in how they're parsing it. See, you'll see it's gone now. That's nothing to do with the model. It's not going to show up once you start using it. So what we want to do now is start automating it, right? Like looping it through all of our data and seeing what the output is, right? So what I'm going to do here is you can just click get code and just copy that information. I'm just going to go in here, make a new folder, and now we can just start working with this. That's my bad. Okay. Now the first thing we want to do is copy our transcripts in here, which we have. I'm going to make a new folder and then make a new file called, process.ts or something. And then I am just going to copy and paste that code in, which just does it for one transcript. Right? All this is doing is effectively just recreating what I did before. And I'm putting my key in the environment variable, but there was a space for you to put your key, so you can just do that. And if you just sign up, they'll give you some credits. So now if I just run this, it should reasonably give me an output. Make a small edit here. There we go. So, and I've got my answers here, right? And the small edit that I made is just jumping ahead a little bit because when I looked at the output, this is, inside content and then text. So I just pulled only the information that we want out. So if I just run this again, you're going to see that I only get the output, right? But once we have this, what we want to do is run it over our transcripts folder. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to pull this away just to make it easier on the model, because what I'm going to do, that is cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask an AI to help me out here, right? So I have this code that, just go to Sonnet. I have a bunch of them in a folder. Um, one large JSON, continuously save this JSON for each meeting so crashes don't affect it. Continue on crashes and print the response that crashed it. This is just from experience. Once you start working with these models more and more, you'll learn to add a bunch of stuff that just makes your life a little bit easier. Okay, perfect. Sonnet is a lot faster. It's not as smart as Opus, but it is definitely faster. Okay, I wonder how this is going to work. Okay. So it did kind of work initially, but we had some sort of issue showing up here. Um, ah, that's fine. We just had an escape issue there. And now we're processing it. The one thing I forgot to add is, can we add printing to console to check progress? I usually just collect a bunch of questions here as I go to see what happens, right? There was a parse issue. It's okay. And something that you usually want to ask is, keep running into that. Okay, you know, um, and I can just, sorry, I'm just going to print the offending thing. You know what? I don't have access to it there. Um, Here's a little trick that's also going to make your life a little bit easier, is for models that you can put words in the mouth of, and that's not even from me, uh, right? Putting words in Claude's mouth is something that's how Anthropic puts it. Uh, you can effectively tell the assistant that it's already said something, right? So you can say, hey, you already started giving me the JSON. Can you please autocomplete the rest? And so it's going to go ahead and do that. And that is usually going to give you a far better response, right? So I can also then just print this so that when we get an issue, I'm also going to be able to tell what happened. And we are working, right? So it's pulling out all the information that we'd like. At least it's worked for one of the meetings that we used. So there we go. Okay, perfect. 2. That's awesome. Here's all these different contacts that were mentioned. That is perfect. And at this point, you've got a good scaffolding to jump off of. Okay, we have our first some sort of issue. Maybe because it's too long, I think it's getting cut off. That looks right to me, you know. It's really strange. One easy thing you can do to always check JSON, if you're on VS Code, is you can just do that. I'm just gonna go, that's what's going on. Okay, so it really needed something like that, right? So I can just say, um, and this is partly because it's haiku. We're using haiku because it's just faster. Um, and it's also great because you're also figuring out all the instructions. Now, what's going to happen sometimes is, haiku is going to fail more reliably when you have this kind of ambiguity or sort of common problems. But because these models often have the same pedigree, if you go to a smarter model, it will now go from failing 20 out of 100 to 1 out of 100. Now, it's going to make your life a lot easier because you're going to need to go through 100 to hit that failure, and then you're not going to see the pattern as clearly. So that's why it's better to iterate on smaller models. It's a bit more frustrating. You're going to see a bit more issues, but that's a good thing, right? It's exactly what you want in a lot of cases. But we've got most of our info here. right? We've got our different meetings. Okay, so it's starting over again. That's okay. What I'm now going to do is take this and I'm just going to start a new chat, right? And we're going to go off and build our UI, right? Because I think this is largely now going to work for us. Yep, it's starting to just work for us, which is great. Now that it's working on Haiku, we can figure out that this is going to cost you fractions of a cent per meeting, and it's really not going to be that much. Whereas Opus probably would have been 10 cents. I'm making that up, but that is close enough to what it was costing me to do the actual meetings, right? For the actual meetings with all the information that I was pulling out there, Opus was about $1 per meeting, right? And Haiku was like 20, 50 times less than that, right? 16 times, I think. So we've got all of our meetings now processed, right? So this is all of our processed, pulled out information. Already this is useful and I can read it. But, same as you, I like a good UX, I like a good UI. So let's just go ahead and build one. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're just going to go ahead and make a front end in a separate folder, right? And because we're in effectively Node, TypeScript, React land, things are very easy, far easier than we think, right? So I can just go create next app, right? And I can call it my front end, right, for this video. And I just keep pressing enter and I am going to be done just in a second, right? And the reason we just put it in a new folder is to separate these concerns a little bit, because one of them is really extracting the data and the other one's using that data and sort of displaying it. In a production app, these would all be together, you'd put them all together, but that's something you can do much later. This lets us experiment a lot easier and sort of make changes, right? So I've opened that up separately. Now I'm just gonna copy in our output.json into just here, let's put it in the public folder. Okay, there we go. That's our summaries folder, right? So I'm just gonna start a new chat here and go extracted data, right? That's the first thing I want to do. But in the meantime, we can already start running this front end just to see what it looks like, right? And if I just run it instantly, now we've got a working front end. It's all good. And we can now just start making changes, right? This is also the time when I would probably start looking for UI libraries or things to make it prettier. But for the time being, we don't even need to do that, right? So now we've got a type spec. Okay, I've got I want to display them in, it's in public summaries.json. Can we load them into a page, show the meeting names in a sidebar on the left, show the sections and data on the right, and have a search bar, right? Can I get the full page code as a single file, right? Perfect. Now let's see what happens. So this is where the benefit of using information that the model already knows, right? Because Next.js is so popular, granted they've changed it a fair bit, that's all I need to say, right? I don't need to give it my folder structure. I don't need to give any of those, because there's a lot that it's already presumed from what it already has. Now, I have no idea what this is going to look like, because every time I ask these questions, they're slightly different, but you'll be able to see how quickly things kind of change. Okay, perfect. So yes, I know it presumes all of these other things. I just want the code for now. What we're going to do is we are, in this case, just to make our life slightly easier, and because I know Next.js, I'm just going to go make a folder that's just going to be a new page, and then I'm going to go page.tsx. You can use this page, which was the one that you were just looking at, but this is going to be slightly easier, right? So that code I can just copy in here, and there we go. It just didn't get the there we go. Okay, so it doesn't actually know meeting summary. but that is a type that we can just copy in here. And now that is good to go, right? And because next is awesome, hoping this works. Okay, this is, so I'm pointing out some of the more common changes that you might need to make is use client. Sometimes, somehow the outputs that you get are not, don't look like that. But see, now we've got the general structure of what we're looking for already, right? Okay, so now the next thing is, can we show the meeting names in the sidebar? Maybe that's because they're not part of summaries.json. Yeah, I guess they're not, so it's just showing you meeting one, meeting two. That's something that we would go back to the extraction code and then sort of change there, and then we come back here. But we can show that, if we have time later. So the next thing you want to do is you just want to parade it up. I usually use shadcn. Don't even know if I'm saying that right. But he's got just a ton of really wonderful looking and this is the aesthetic that I like, right? It's very dense, information dense, and very simple, and so this is the kind of thing that I usually like looking at. So you can pick radix or any one of the other ones. But what I usually do is, do you know shadcn UI? And I'll look at the answer, and that gives you a bit of an information about what the model actually knows, right? So what I will do is oftentimes do the installation. I should, right? It's going to ask me a bunch of questions. I'm just going to press enter. Forget about the fonts for now. App structure, whatever. And it tells me, okay, here's how I start adding things, right? I can just Command AC this. Okay, so now you go. Okay, we might have to switch out of Opus soon enough. But what it's hopefully going to do is this already has the list of available components, how to import different things, and I'm just going to work a little bit ahead of this just to save us some time, because this is using card, separator, and sidebar and input, so I can already go ahead and install those, right? Card, input. I don't think it has a sidebar, and I've seen the model make that mistake sometimes. Huh, maybe it does. Maybe I missed that. And now what happens if we just use this code, right? Yeah, it doesn't have a sidebar. Um, just say it doesn't, it really doesn't, But then again, I'm a little confused because it did have this here. So maybe it's somewhere in templates. Yeah, I need to know more, a little bit more. But this is me going, I can still work with what I have, right? So now it's gotten rid of that. We probably still need use client. I'm just going to move this to the top so that, either you can keep repasting your code to the AI and say, this is my code, I've made some edits, and that's going to work for you. And then it's just going to keep giving you the full code from then on. Or you can do what I'm doing and kind of put the stuff that I'm not changing at all at the very top. Right? Not the right way to do it. Cringe a little bit looking at it, but it helps for now. There we go. And we can add a few more things. Okay. Oh, that's a new chat that displays. Can you add a date filter to show meetings only after a certain point, improve the typography and overall look and polish? And can you add switch between showing all or other sections of the meeting info. Oh. Okay, I'm just going to get rid of that. There we go. So we're on Sonnet now. No idea how well it's going to work with that. Let's see, oh, it's not actually following practically exactly what things are. It needs the card component. Yeah, it is using the card component. So we're all good. Yes, now we're using Tailwind and we're using CSS to sort of better structure and put more white space around these things. And really, everything that you saw on the original thing, when I showed you how my app looked like, I didn't set any of those. I just gave my preferences and continually gave my preferences back to the AI, and it kept building the thing that I wanted, right? It's okay. For now, we can probably end here, with the invalid dates. But this is perfectly usable. So at this point, you're at you have something where you have two different prompts and you have two different things. If you want to pull more information out, you can add more questions. If you want to show more in the UI, you can very easily just go in there and then just ask for, hey, I would like this to happen, I would like that. And really, the power of the web and AI and everything comes together because the web's already got wonderful UI libraries that have existed long enough that models know them, right? If you want animations, if you want things to be on top of behind each other, that's already there. The web's amazing at deploying things, right? This right now, 3 commands I could push up to Vercel, serve a million users, and I'm all good, right? With all the protections and everything else that I want to if I do, right? Looks great. I can switch UI libraries very easy, right? I get strong typing and all the other benefits. So it blows my mind now just how easily we can do these things, right? And we're at 34 minutes. So it's very, very easy, right? And that's changed a lot, especially for me. I remember the old XKCD on how quickly you can get to something that will then save you time. Because this particular tool is going to save me hours and hours and hours. It's already saved me 10 to 20 hours just on that first round of being able to go through my meetings. And that distance keeps shortening, right? As models keep getting better. They're not at the point where they can write production code for you yet. You really shouldn't deploy anything they've written for you into production just yet. But they're already very close to the point where you have magic hands. You can just build things that look great, not just radio UIs, things that just look great and serve a ton of people, um, and just help people, really, right? So hopefully this has been helpful. One of the things that I grew up with that was really great was Andrej Karpathy's, built from scratch series, and I thought those were really helpful. And oftentimes I find it helpful to watch someone work or understand where they get hung up, where they get stuck. And so hopefully this has just been really, really useful. I had a lot of fun making the tool. I had a lot of fun making this video. And, like I'm always available on Twitter or YouTube if you have any questions.